As a little side note before I go into the rules library, I'd just like to mention that there's a little Thumbtack tool here. As you may have noticed, these panels, when you open them, they act as a sort of drop-down menu. And they, when you open one, the other one closes. But sometimes you might want to actually keep a panel open and still be able to use these other panels. So there is this Thumbtack button, and when you hold that down or keep that depressed, you can go to these other tools, and they also have these thumbnail buttons, many of them. And it won't close this one. In fact, if you quit the program and come back, this panel will still be open. So that is a way to optimize your workflow, so that you can always keep this panel open when you want to keep working with this tool. So let me go ahead and clear our working area here and go back to our foliage tool here, and I'm going to cover some of the features of the rules library. And this is basically the area that defines what the foliage is actually going to look like. As you've noticed, we got a lot of presets, and these have all been created inside the program using this foliage library. There are basically a lot of different types of shapes you can get using this program, and they're all basically defined by physical rules that are defined using this library. So I'll go ahead and cover the basics of how this works. As I said before, there are up to 10 rules, which means you can have up to 10 branches on a branch. That is, there'll be a trunk, and then it'll branch off into another branch, and then that branch will branch off into more branches, and so on, up to 10 times. We usually start with the first rule. I'm going to go ahead and make our rule count 1, so we can concentrate on this one item, as you can see here, that we're drawing with. The emit count is the number of particles that are emitted for this rule. It can be any number, but usually on this first rule we just do 1. You might do more though. You could have 3 or 10 or however many you wanted to. But if we're doing a tree trunk, there would usually be just one trunk, so we would go ahead and start with just one rule. For other rules, you might have it split into a branch that splits into two different branches, or it might split into 3 different branches, and that's where you would set that in that emit count. For each rule, that first rule might have 1, the second one might have 3, and so on and so on. The branch lifespan controls how long this branch will last, or how long it will be, basically. For a tree trunk, we might want it to last quite a long time, so we could set that to say 100. That would be in the number of steps that are processed. That would be 100 steps of processing. There's also a repeat rule field that will repeat this rule that many number of times. Say you wanted a branch to go for a ways and then split, but you wanted to just keep using that branch. You could have that branch repeat a certain number of times. For example, a weeping willow or a fern, you might have a fern that branches several times. Let me draw an example. You might have a fern that starts like this and then branches like that. But basically you want to do that same thing 100 times or 10 times or whatever, to do like this. Keep doing that, do that, and so forth and so on. You would just basically set this repeat factor to however many times you wanted that to continue drawing that way. Then there's the red, green, and blue fields. That basically just controls the color of this particular branch that we're drawing with. That's in 0 to 255 range, and that's just basically like normal red, green, and blue mixing. Then there's a size field, which is the size in pixels. This is modified by this global setting here. So basically this size here controls the size of a single branch, and you can have a different size for each branch. For example, say your tree trunk would be large, and then the next branch would be slightly small, and the next branch down will be smaller than that until you get down to almost nothing. And then you can use this global setting out here to change the global size of the tree, or the global width or fatness of that tree in general. So and then there's a follow mouse parameter, and this basically lets you control the drawing using the mouse, or have it just normally normally grow in a specific direction. In this case, this brush is following this mouse, as you can see there. And it's following, it's set to 0.5. If I set that to 1, it would follow it very, very closely, very accurately. If I set it to like 0.1, it would just somewhat follow the mouse. Or 0.001. It would sort of get a very spline quality at that point. It would like overshoot your mouse coordinates and have to kind of gravitate back towards it. It's sort of a gravity setting in a way. As you can see there, I was only drawing in this little area right here, but it overshot and went way over there and came back. That's a very, very low setting. You can get some very interesting results using that. Very, very smooth looking spline results and that sort of thing. Or if you want a more accurate representation of your mouse drawing, you can use a higher value, say 0.5 or even 1. Or even 0.1 will give a fairly accurate result. But when you start using those very low values, you can get some very interesting results. And it can really overcompensate in a ways too. If you use a very low value, it'll just sort of gradually follow in the direction of the mouse, and that can be useful as well. Or if you don't want an exact representation of your mouse stroke, but you want to have it a little bit of influence as well. Now there are also gravity parameters here. Moving on, let me define a second rule so we can actually see something that is affected by gravity. I'll make this rule end, and I'll set the rule count to 2. Now let me see. I'll set this lifespan a little bit lower. Let's see, let's try 20 something. That's reasonable. And let me set this to a more reasonable value. There we go. As you can see, we are drawing and our branches are splitting. It splits there, it splits there, it splits there, there, and there. We have the first rule set to repeat 19 times. So there are going to be a number of these splits, but we keep on drawing with this first rule because of that repeating of that first rule. Now we see the second rule is set to a very short lifespan. That's just 1. So if we set this to a higher lifespan, these second branches will get a lot longer. And that's again, that's in the number of steps. So those branches that second branch will be processed 12 times. Now when you apply gravity to these, I already have a little bit, but I'm going to use more so we can see the results a little better. Negative value will be upwards, so a positive value will be a downwards gravity. In this case, I have it set to a negative value. As you can see, these branches gradually start to slope upwards. I'll set it to a positive value, and we'll see them start to slope downwards, affected by gravity, as you see there. And this could be either useful for gravity or for branches that are affected, say, by sunlight, and they might gravitate upwards towards the sun, or gravitate in a specific direction defined by X, Y, and Z values. A high value will give you a lot of warping, and a low value will give a very small amount of warping. And these are all in world coordinates. That is, they're relative to the world that we live in, and not relative to individual branches or that sort of thing. So Y is always up and down, X is always left and right, and Z is always in and out. There's also a velocity factor, and this is not an exact velocity. It actually causes the program to generate a random velocity. So let me set this gravity to 0 so we can have a good idea of what's happening here. And I'll go back to the first rule, and I'll tell it to just branch instead of branching even odd to demonstrate this. Now, as you can see, we're getting some branches that are going this way and some that are going that way. That is because this, on the second rule where we have velocity set, this actually creates a random number between positive 12 and negative 12. So it might be 6, it might be negative 8, or anywhere between negative 12 and positive 12. So in sometimes it'll branch this way, and sometimes it'll branch that way. Let me and again, these are in world coordinates, so X and Z, you should always use probably X and Z at the same time, whereas Y might be a different value. because Y will cause it to branch up and down. You might want branches that randomly go up and down, or you might want them to have go just basically straight. Like a pine tree might have branches that go pretty much straight out. So if I set Y to 0, but these other two at random values, you can see what happens there. They more or less go straight out. But if I use a very large random value for that Y parameter, you'll see them going in random directions, like up and down, like that. Bear in mind, these parameters are also relative to the velocity that our particles are already traveling. So there's a damping parameter that will actually let you arrest that motion. If you needed to get a particle or a branch that went exactly straight out every time, you could do that. I'll go back to this first rule. These damping parameters are actually relative to the next branch that is created. So I'll set them all to 1. That's damping of 1, which means the motion of the velocity of this branch or this particle that's traveling will stop completely, because it's damped, being damped by the full amount is between 0 and 1. And then our new velocity that's being created will be only relative to the branch that's being created in these parameters that we have set here. Alright, so there's also a vector parameter, which is very useful. It does not create a random number. Instead, it is an absolute value. Say you created a branch and you just wanted it to intrinsically go a specific direction. Let me take these random values out, for example. And say we wanted these vectors to go just left, for example. We could set that to a value, or sorry, just right. And they would always go in that direction, or you could use a -12 and they'd always go the other direction. This is very useful for on that first branch that we create, branch 1, which is usually a trunk. Say we only wanted this branch to go upwards and not be following the mouse. If it wasn't following the mouse, it wouldn't do very much. It would just sit there. So you could actually set a vector here, and that branch would always grow upwards. That was maybe a little strong. Let's try 3 and see what happens. But in this case, that branch would always grow upwards. And I'll turn that damping of Y off. As you can see, it'll just create a tree that just keeps growing and growing and growing without any interaction from the mouse. And that is basically what the vector parameters do. It's an absolute value that is added to the velocity when a particle or branch is created. It's only used that one time. And then finally, there's the split type, the branch split type. I've already showed the branch and the branch even odd. So let me go over that again. Basically, when one branch ends and a new branch is created, it'll use the split type to create the new branch. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 types. I'll start with split, and that basically means when it gets to the end, it'll split. The current branch will end, and it'll split into however many new rules are defined for that next rule. And I'll create a random parameter to this so we can see it a little better. There we go. And I'll take that vector off of there. So basically, we create a tree trunk that grows upwards, and it splits into these 4 or maybe 24 new branches. That's basically the split type. Now, very much similar to that is the branch type, only the current branch will not end, but it'll keep on going. But 2 new, or however many new branches that are in this emit count, will also be created. So the existing branch will continue going, but also the new branches will start. In this case, well, we're getting something really crazy there. But I think you get the idea that the existing branch will keep on going, and let me take this down to say 2 and see what happens. Alright, there we go. Anyways, and there's also a let me set this to 3 branches for now. Alright, and I'll make this next branch the end branch. And I have to do this basically to demonstrate what we're doing here. Alright. Maybe 5, it may be 3. Anyways, nice man, repeat. Turn that off. Okay. That makes it a little more understandable anyways. Alright, go back to the second rule. Turn this repeat off of here. Okay. So now we've created a trunk that grows upwards and then splits into 5 new branches, and that is what the branching does. There's also a branch even odd, which is very useful when you're using that repeat rule there. Let's see. I'll use this on the first rule. It makes it a little easier to demonstrate. We have the first rule set to repeat 19 times, and I'll use branch even odd. There we go. And as you can see, well, this is a little better demonstrated if I set this emit count to 1 also. Alright, and I'll set this to 0. Okay, now that's a good demonstration of branching even odd. I have this first rule set to branch even odd, and as it goes up, you can see it branches on one side, and then it branches on the other side, and then it branches on this basic left, right, left, right, left, right. That's very useful for creating evergreen trees or ferns, anything that has that even odd branching pattern. And then there's finally the ends branch type, which basically tells the program it's reached the end of the rules, like we have on this third branch, and that is where that is where it stops drawing. It is also controlled by the rule count up there. So basically, using these rules combined, you can create very complex tree patterns, each branch having its own set of rules. That can become fairly complicated. As you can see from our examples, you can create a large number of tree types. And this is really a good place to start when you want to start learning this. I hope I've given you enough basic information to understand what these parameters do. There's also a page on the Best 3D dedicated to explaining what these parameters do as well, and there will probably be a lot more information forthcoming. There's also the groups on Yahoo Groups or eGroups, where you can ask questions and that sort of thing. So I hope I've given you a lot of information that it was at least somewhat understandable, and there's probably yet more to come. So there you go. Thank you very much for watching.